I'm Roger Jennings, the president of R. Jennings Manufacturing Company. We have been manufacturing screen printing equipment for more than 30 years. We also print here and we sell all the supplies. So we've had an opportunity to use every brand, every option to find out which brand, which method, which piece of equipment is best. I talk to maybe 50 people a day, and I can tell you that in more than 30 years, everyone who starts out in this business starts out wrong, makes mistakes, costly mistakes. Purpose of this video is to show you how to avoid those costly mistakes. First, we're going to start off by looking at some work submitted to me by a commercial shop for evaluation. And I'm going to evaluate this work, and then we'll talk about what in the equipment that you're looking at makes a difference so you don't make these kind of mistakes. This is an expensive jacket and the first print of 3. Notice all the little dots around the edge here. Those dots come from the emulsion or capillary film in the screen breaking down. That's just a matter of knowing how to make a screen correctly. And you'll notice that the image is out of registration when you look at one color versus another. They are not lining up correctly. You'll notice that some of the letters are fatter than others, and it's crooked. And look at this, it's really a disaster. You really cannot ship this kind of work to a customer. Also, you may or may not be able to see if the image has a shine to it. The ink is very heavy. That's a sign of lack of control. So that's really not the kind of image that we want to give our customers. So now let's go to look at the second jacket by the same customer. The second image looks better than the first, and you'll notice those little dots are missing. And the reason they're missing is the customer taped the underside of the screen so the ink cannot leak through the screen. However, when they taped, they also inadvertently taped over the top of the O, so the O does not print completely. And yet you can still see the S is too thick. The image is really not better. It's clearly out of registration. So it's not an acceptable print, and another expensive jacket was wasted. This is the third print. It's getting better, but meanwhile they're grinding up these jackets, learning how to print. And the reason it looks so much sharper is the person printing obviously only pulled the squeegee one time. On those prior prints, they probably pawed over the print multiple times, putting too much ink through the screen. But we're still out of registration, as you can see. There's a little pinhole here, a little unwanted green ink in the white area. And of course the letters are not the same size. That's not good. The image is still shiny. That's not good. And this is a jacket that has this 3M reflective sewn on it. That's very expensive stuff. So these are pricey jackets, and we're wasting these jackets just because we don't know how to print. Okay, so what do we need to know so we don't waste money like this customer did? There are multiple causes of the problems we saw in those 3 jackets, but certainly the principal cause was the screen. Now there are many different kinds of screens, and you can watch our videos on screens. Most screens that are sold have the mesh glued to the frame. Wooden screens are absolute garbage. Never buy one. They warp. There are all kinds of problems. You're just buying problems like you saw in those 3 jackets if you use wooden screens. Never buy a wooden screen. If you buy an aluminum screen that's been welded together and the mesh glued onto the frame, that's better than wood because it won't warp through processing in water. But still, they're totally unacceptable. If any salesman tries to sell you either wood or any kind of stretch and glue frame, go find another salesman, because that guy doesn't understand this business. And if he doesn't understand something as basic as that, he doesn't understand other aspects of the business. There's only one best screen, and all the top shops in America use this one best screen. It's called a Newman screen, and I have one right here. Now I've been printing for over 30 years, and I own only 12 of these. Why? Because we do not keep the images on the screen. When the job's over, we take the ink out, we take the emulsion off, we retension the mesh, and we reuse it. And we can use the same set of screens on 3 jobs in a day. So what's different about this frame? And by the way, Newman is named after the inventor, Don Newman, and it's sold by company Stretch Devices. We handle them, other dealers handle them. In any event, these frames have tubes on 3 or 4 sides. 3 sides is better. And the mesh is in a locking strip here. There's a little strip of plastic in there that holds the mesh in place. You put a common wrench on here and you rotate the roller, and that tightens up the screen. Why? Because 2 hours after you've tensioned the mesh, you've lost 25% of the tension. So you retension, regain the lost tension, and raise the tension a little bit more. 4 hours later, another 15%. Do the same thing. Retention, raise the tension level. Next day, another 5%. So you've gone from 25 to 15 to 5%. You're losing less and less tension. And as a result, the mesh is becoming dimensionally more stable. In those 3 jackets that we saw, somebody stretched those screens up probably very nicely, but before they actually went to print the job, the mesh had lost all the tension. And so when you print, what you're typically doing is taking a squeegee and you're pulling it down the screen, and what that does when you're printing, the area over which you have passed, the mesh is extended like a rubber band. It's tight. But the mesh in the screen in front of the squeegee is compressed, and it forms a wave. And then you find people trying to say ergonomic squeegees. That's all nonsense. You don't need that. You want the screen to be tight on both before you've printed and after you've printed. You want the mesh to always stay tight. Once the job is done and we've reclaimed the screen, before we put a second image on there, again we put our wrench on here, just takes a couple of seconds. Boom, recover that lost tension, raise the tension level, go to our next job. After we've accumulated 500 prints on this screen, it's what we call dimensionally stable or work hardened. That means the tension at the end of the job is the same as the tension at the beginning of the job, and we don't have those problems you saw on those jackets because the mesh is really tight. Okay? And until you get to work hardened status, the risk is print 1 and print 300 don't look the same because your tension level is dropping during the course of the job. So step 1 in getting started is using a quality screen, because that is going to avoid a lot of the problems that you saw on those 3 jackets. Okay, what's next? You really will not need much equipment to start your screen printing business. You will need a few things. First of all, you'll need a positive. And I have 2 types of positives here. This one is on vellum paper. You can get this from Casey's Page Mill in Colorado. Or these are plastic positives. The image is dense black, it's on clear plastic. And this was printed on an Epson printer, which is dye-based, not pigment. Pigment has a very expensive supply cost that goes with it, but the dye is much cheaper. Now, the way those positives in both cases were created was using a computer program. There are other ways of doing it, but the simplest way is to get CorelDRAW. Don't buy that in the retail store. It's too expensive. We can tell you how to get CorelDRAW real cheap. Once you have these positives, you're going to take a screen like this and you're going to coat it either with liquid emulsion or capillary film. This one happens to have capillary film. You're going to lay the positive against the back of the screen in yellow light. That's simply a yellow bulb you buy at the hardware store, a bug light. And then you're going to expose the screen, which means you need an exposure unit. You make your own.